This episode is not only for business owners, but it's also for hiring managers or anyone who wants to know how the hiring process works, what to look out for, and how to find the best candidate for your company. Because today I want to tell you how to find employees from the start, from posting a job ad to the interview process and everything that comes after you hired a potential candidate. Point number 3 is going to be super valuable, but stop before you skip and want to move all the way to point number 3. Stick around because you need point number 1 and number 2 to understand point number 3. So let's dive right in and get started. Adding employees, whether you add them for your own company or you're a hiring manager at your current job, adding employees is always a journey. Finding the right candidate, training that person, and really hoping that that person sticks around and works out in the end. And where it all starts, it really starts at understanding the current landscape. And that's point number 1, understanding the current landscape. We are in a post-pandemic world. We're in a post-pandemic time. So it's really essential for you as an employer to understand what employees want. The pandemic has changed the workforce. People are way more content with either lower pay, or if they feel unhappy, they're going to resign and find another place of employment. But the biggest part that the pandemic really had an impact on is remote work or a hybrid model. So as an employer, you really have to understand that remote work or a hybrid model, so let's say you work 2 days from the office and 3 days from home, is really the future of employment. So remote work, hybrid work is really the future. Plus, it's another perk. A lot of employees or a lot of potential candidates really look for that perk in a job ad. So if you offer remote work or if you offer some sort of hybrid model, you have a better chance to get more qualified people to apply for your job. Number 2 is setting expectations. So before you go out there, before you post your job ad on Indeed or LinkedIn or ZipRecruiter, you want to be well aware of the expectations. So you have to define the expectations. And expectations go way beyond the academic level of the person you want to apply for this position. Expectations define the role, the responsibilities, but also what type of training would you offer that person? How long is the training period? Do you have any feedback rounds? Is there a weekly check-in? Is there a monthly check-in? Do you do reviews every quarter? And you want to outline this all in a document where you outline all the expectations. So expectations is everything that you want to expect from the future employee, but also what the person can expect once they are hired in your organization. Expectations are also defining the role, daily responsibilities, performance reviews, and first week goals. Setting clear expectations and really defining the outline of the role, the daily responsibilities, and everything that has to do with the role, and outlining it all in one document really helps you to craft the perfect job description. And now my favorite part, number 3, the interview process. So you outline your expectations and now it's time to post your job ad. In a job ad, I always recommend write a little blurb about your company and what position you're looking for, and then start with the responsibilities that the person would have, bullet point them, and then also include the qualifications. At the bottom, I encourage you to include benefits, because benefits, I want to say, make it or break it, whether someone is going to apply for your role or not. Depending on the role that you're looking for, I personally recommend that you include a salary range or an hourly compensation range. And why do I recommend that? So let's say you leave it open-ended. You get tons of applicants. People range from anywhere wanting $18 an hour all the way to $40 an hour. So that means you have way more work calling them all up, setting up interviews, understanding what the compensation they're looking for. And that wastes a lot of time, it's super inefficient, and plus you get charged a lot from whether it's Indeed or ZipRecruiter, because posting a job is not free. Of course you can post a job on a job board, or you can, I believe, post a job for free on Indeed, but if you really want to find candidates, if you want to fill the role, you have to boost those ads and you have to put money in it. So you want to make sure your job ad is really tailored to a person that would most likely resonate to and could be a good fit for your company. It's similar to online marketing. So when you try to promote or when you try to market your product, you don't just market it to everyone and anyone. No, you market it to the niche that you think most likely going to purchase your product. So you want to do the same with your job ad. So by including an hourly compensation or a salary range, you most likely only attract people who are willing to accept an offer somewhere within those parameters. And now that you posted the ad and resumes keeps rolling in, you want to check out each resume. And whether you use Indeed or ZipRecruiter, there's little thumbs up, thumbs down, and little actions you can take. For example, reach out to the person voicemail, and there's already pre-written blurbs that you can easily send out. That's why I really prefer working with Indeed and ZipRecruiter. It's super easy, it's straightforward, very time efficient. And once you find a resume and you say, hey, this could be a potential candidate, pick up the phone and call them. Do not send any emails, do not schedule a first interview, just pick up the phone and call them. And why do I want you to call the person without scheduling any interviews? When you call them, it's super unexpected. They don't expect your call, and that's exactly what you want. That's the key. So you want to know, how does a person respond when they pick up the phone and they don't know who's calling them? Of course, the majority of people don't pick up calls nowadays when the caller ID is unknown, but there's a handful of people who will pick up. And we really want to know, how do they respond when they pick up the phone? Do they know who you are? Do they remember applying for the job? And that gives you a first initial understanding of the candidate. So the initial phone call is really just an impression. It's an impression that you want to get from the candidate. I used to call people and sometimes I get the answer like, who is this? Wait, did I apply for this job? Can you just explain the job role again? Candidates like that, and I'll be very honest, are not a great fit for a candidate that I'm looking for. If you don't remember what jobs you applied for, I don't know, you might not work out in the future role. And during the phone call, it's a 5-minute phone call. You just want to see whether they're still interested in this job and just briefly describe what it is. So for example, if you look for a sales agent, you will tell them, hey, I'm Nina, I'm calling from the Social Wisdom regarding your resume for our sales position. Are you still interested? If they say yes, then you can tell them, all right, that's awesome. Here are the main responsibilities of the role. And then you can say being on the phone all day, making at least 200 calls a day, and talking to prospective clients. By describing the role again in just a few bullet points, you can give the person that you're talking to on the phone, so you can give the potential employee the chance to say, hey, this role is not really for me. And that's great. You want to weed out anyone who's not really interested in the role. And if you get the feeling that the person on the other side might not really work out for this role, you can just tell them, this is just the initial 5-minute interview. If we decide to move forward with you to the second interview round, someone will be reaching out. And I typically tell people this, and then no one's going to reach out to them. And a couple of days later, they get the standard email that we moved on in our hiring process and at this time did not select your resume. Let's assume you like the person that you're talking to on the phone. The next step is to set up a video call, whether it's a Zoom call or a call on Teams. And why do I recommend to set up a video call rather than an in-person interview? Pre-pandemic, I always set up in-person interviews. So I booked the conference room, I scheduled interviews throughout the entire day and met everyone face to face. And I think that's a super inefficient way to do interviews. First of all, a good amount of people actually ghost you, so they don't even show up for the interview. So there you sit, you wait for the person to come, you're all prepared, maybe even you printed out the resume and they don't show up. So it's a super waste on your end. And sometimes a candidate shows up and they were great on the phone, but then you see them, they look super sloppy, and you just know this person ain't it. But now you have to interview them in person, so you know that they made it all the way to your office, they came up, so you don't want to sheesh them off in like a 5 to 10 minute interview. So you have to take the time and interview them for like 20-30 minutes. I think again that's super inefficient. And the past couple of years really changed the way on how we use technology and how we talk to each other. So I think even though people can potentially come to your office for an in-person interview, I think it's way more efficient to do a Zoom call. And here are the reasons why I think it's way more efficient. Number one, you can understand whether this person has any tech skills or not. If you don't know how to join a Zoom call or use Teams or download Zoom, maybe you're not the right fit for this role. And also, if you look at them on Zoom and the person ain't it, then it's easier to say, well, thanks for coming onto this interview, and you can cut it shorter because it feels less, I want to say, weird rather than if the person drove all the way to your office. Especially for remote roles. So if you're looking for a fully remote team member, Why do they have to come in the office for an in-person interview? They will not work from your office, so it doesn't really matter if they are able to commute to your office or not. So I think a Zoom call or any type of video call is totally enough for the interview process. Now keep in mind, it really depends on the role. If you're looking for an executive, you're looking for a C-suite member or a manager that has to report to the office every single day, I would probably do the third interview in person, where I would potentially extend the offer. So first would be the phone call, second would be a Zoom call, and then the third time I would ask that person to come to the office to get to know each other a little bit more. Maybe someone else is involved in the hiring process, and at that point, if you really like the person, you can extend the offer in person. If you want a team member to come to the office, I would recommend you do an in-person interview. The third interview should be in person, just to see if they're okay with the drive, the commute to work. And let's say you reach out to someone and they do not pick up the phone. Always leave a voicemail, tell them the name of the company, tell them your name, and the phone number to call them back. And what I've noticed in the past, even if you leave a voicemail, people are not likely to return your phone call. So what I like to do, I like to text them. So pick up your phone, text them, hey, this is Nina from the Social Wisdom. I was just calling you and I left a voicemail in regard to the position you applied. If you're still interested, give me a call back or text me back. And texting employees just feels like a fresh approach. It's more innovative rather than just the phone call. If they're interested, they can give you a call back, they can text you back, and then you can set up an interview from there. And the second interview should be a more in-depth interview. So you really want to understand if the person is the right fit for the role. You want to explain the role in depth. You want to explain all the responsibilities. And of course, you want to talk a little bit about the company and the company culture. And there are a few general questions, a handful of general questions that I always ask. And I found them very helpful because they can really tell you whether this is the right candidate or not. And my first question that I always ask is, why did you leave your current job of employment, or why did you leave your previous employer? It really depends on whether they're still employed or they're already left. But I want to know the reason why they left or are going to leave their place of employment. And this will give you a really good understanding, I think, of the character of the person. If the answer makes sense and if it's a reasonable explanation of why they want to leave it, I'm okay with that. But if you just get a weird answer and the person just scrambles up some thoughts that sounds a little bit off, maybe it's not the right person for you. And my next question is always, what is your earliest start date and what compensation are you looking for? And I previously mentioned to you, I always put in the compensation range, whether it's hourly or salary, in the job ad. So let's say your hourly compensation is $18 to $22 an hour, and the person you interview, they might not have read your job description all the way, and some people don't really read, and they expect $30 an hour. So what does it tell me? First, you didn't really read the job ad, but also if you want $30 an hour, you're probably not happy with the $22. Even if they come down and telling you, no, $22 an hour is totally fine, they work for you a couple of months before they're just unhappy and move on. And that happened to us in the place where I'm working right now multiple times. So that's why I always include the compensation and pick people that are within the compensation range. I also like to ask, how would you exceed the expectations in this role? And this question gets your potential candidate thinking. So how can I exceed the expectations? So let's say you're a sales agent and you expect them to do 150 calls. Your answer could be, well, I'm doing 10% more calls than expected from me. I always follow up, I'm super organized, I never miss a scheduled appointment, and I'll be on top of my stuff. So you really want to understand how can they exceed the expectation that you outline, and how quick are they in the thinking process. So really, I feel like for me it helps to really gauge and to understand someone's character. And same if you're looking for a manager, that person could tell you, well, if one of my team members is sick, I will make sure that this role is covered, whether I do it myself or I come up with a quick plan. But you just really want to understand how quick are they on the feet to give you an answer. Another question I like to ask, what appealed to you to apply for this job? And it's another, I want to say, like a character question. Did they apply for this job just because it's remote but they don't really care about the job? Or did they apply for the job because that is truly what they want to do? For me, and just from my experience on hiring a lot of people, every time you hire someone who just applies for whether it's just the salary or the location of work, but they don't actually want to do the work or they're not really super interested in the work, they resign after a few weeks. So I recommend always find someone who actually likes the work or who has similar experience or who just wants to do that type of work. Most of the time, that person will stick around longer. And my next question is, what are your career goals? And career goals is the same. It's a character question. So if you hire for the sales position, but that person really wants to run their own business or wants to become a manager, but it's an entry-level sales job, I don't know if that really works well together. Maybe that person expects a year from now to be the manager of sales, but that's not your intention. Or they say, well, I'm kind of building my own business, but I just want a job on the side, but I really want to run my own business. So that gets you thinking, do they really want this role, or is this just more like a bridge that they use to generate income to pay their rent, but they're really focusing all the effort on building their own company? And maybe that person is the right fit for you, or maybe that's not the right fit for you. And my last question that I always ask, how does insert your company name bring value to our clients? And I like to ask this question because it really tells you whether the person did the research on your company or not. And just a word of caution, if the potential candidate is still employed and they tell you that their start date could be tomorrow and they don't have to put in a 2 weeks notice, keep asking a few more questions. If the reason that they give you makes sense, so for example, they work at a super horrible workplace and no one is respecting them, it's a little bit easier to understand why you don't want to give a 2 weeks notice. But if you work at a perfectly fine workplace and you don't want to give a 2 weeks notice just because you don't give a F about the employer and you just want to start a new job, then that gets you thinking. If they do it with the previous employer, they can do the same thing with you and they leave you high and dry. And trust me, this happened to us many times before, where overnight or over the weekend people just decided to resign and call it quits, and all of a sudden you're there on a Monday morning with a whole lot of work, you don't have any team members to cover it, and I feel like it's disrespectful to your employer just to leave them hanging high and dry. And just to finish this section, the interview process, you might have heard it, hire fast and fire fast. I totally disagree with that statement. I believe take time when it comes to your hiring process. Try to find a candidate that fits. Of course, it's never ensured whether the person that you hired will work out or not. Maybe you have to fire that person in a month from now because the role just doesn't suit that person. But I believe take more time in the hiring process, look through resumes, conduct interviews, and really find a person that you think fits rather than just hiring under pressure, hiring the first person that comes in the door just to realize that that person hates the role and resigns, or you have to terminate that person. Also, hiring does cost money. It costs money to put your ads up on Indeed and ZipRecruiter. It takes a lot of your time, or maybe you have a hiring manager, it takes a lot of their time. You have to train the person. So there's a lot more involved than just slamming an ad up on the internet that you look for a new position. It's a lot of stuff involved also from your end, training the person, making them comfortable, providing them equipment. So in my opinion, you shouldn't rush the hiring process. Go with the candidate that you feel comfortable with, even if it takes a little bit longer. Step number 4, onboarding. So let's say you extended the job offer, the potential candidate accepted it, now it's time to onboard that person. And I bet you know it, I know it, we all been in that position before. You start your first day at your new job, and you're just nervous. Everyone is nervous. I mean, it's a nervous thing. If you start a new job, that's just a nervous situation. It's not something you do on a day-to-day basis. So as an employer, it's your responsibility to make the new hire feel comfortable. And you can achieve this with a few different things. Number 1, I recommend some sort of HR system that triggers a welcome email, so including the start time and just summarizing the amount of pay and whether you work remote and if you have to report to the office, what's the parking situation like, where can you park your car, the address. And your HR system should also trigger all the necessary paperwork, anything that that person needs to finish on the first day at the job. If you don't have an HR system, write an email, write a welcome email, and have all the paperwork ready for the person to complete on day 1. From my experience, the first day is always filled with filling out paperwork, reading the handbook, getting to know their coworkers, and really familiarizing themselves with apps or any softwares you're using, and really try just to get a general overview. And the process that I'm using myself to make sure onboarding is super smooth, I create a few documents, and I think these documents can really help, not only help you as an employer, but also help your hire to feel more comfortable. I always create a day one checklist with all the things that your hire needs to cross off, whether it's the paperwork, downloading any necessary apps, or anything that is needed from the person. So if the new hire has a document, they know exactly, okay, I have to do all those items and I can check mark them off. And number two, a document that explains the role again and the expectations. And last but not least, a document with first week goals. So for example, you're hiring a social media manager or social media coordinator. Their first week goals could be obtaining all social logins, looking at your branding, and giving you first glance suggestions. The more organized your onboarding process is, the less the new hire feels stressed out. Because trust me, you don't want to hire someone that shows up the first day of work, nothing is prepared, they don't have anything to fill out, no one knows who they are, and the hire is stressed and they think, oh my god, what type of peephole is this? I definitely don't want to work here. Nope. You don't want to make the mistake. You wanted to hire things. This is a great place to work at and I want to stay here. And this place is super organized. And number 5, feedback. After the first week, you want to check in with the new hire and see how they adjusted and just to give a general feedback. It could be a 5 to 10 minute talk just to really gauge where they are in the process and if anything is needed. And moving forward, it really depends on the role, but I recommend doing performance reviews once a month or every quarter. So you can do it like once a month for about 5 to 10 minutes just to look over their key performance indicators or goals that they had reached. And then every quarter you can do more like an in-depth feedback review where you can tell the person, hey, I've noticed you're doing this in the past, let's increase it, or this is what you're doing great, this is where you need more feedback. And then you can provide giving them feedback so they can grow in the role. And having those performance reviews, having those monthly check-ins and quarterly check-ins really will help you to coach the hire. My last point, number 6, things to keep in mind. Being an employer carries many responsibilities and obligations. So this is any tax forms or any insurances that you should be aware of. And of course, I cannot give you any advice on that, but I recommend websites such as NOLO or SBA, Small Business Administration, to start your research and to know where exactly you have to go. And of course, you can always contact a lawyer to make sure you're doing the right thing. I hope this episode helped you to understand the current landscape, what to look in a potential candidate, how to prepare that person for your first day, how to conduct the interview, and everything in between. And that led us also yet again to another episode of the Content Marketing Cheat Sheet podcast. I'm so glad that you're still here in 2023 with me, and I cannot wait to continue learning with you. Until next week, goodbye, or how we say in Germany, auf Wiedersehen.